Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. It's time for the C3 stream. All right, good evening. Welcome to the C3 stream. I am trying to do all sorts of little stuff, guys. Hold on. There we go. Fix lighting, number one. All right, so here's the deal. We were messing around with software this past week when we were doing software stuff. So I am hopefully routing you guys. Hey, Joe. You're good, man. We're just kicking off, right? We are rocking on YouTube as far as I can tell. We're working on one of the places in Facebook, but as far as I can tell, we're not coming through on our other Facebook spot. How do you cross post? Do you guys know how to cross post? Or cross send into somehow there's a way to send your stream into more than one place. You guys know what I'm talking about? They make this stuff so complicated, so hard. And we started using a software for church that was supposed to simplify this stuff. So all right, here's what we'll do. We'll do it the old school way. Here's what we're going to do. We will post it old school. Come join the C3 stream on YouTube tonight. Love PA. Is that kosher? Can I do that, guys? All right, so if you're joining us from the community, I'm glad. Community area, I hope you're coming and joining us. Yeah. Well, we'll rock and roll. I can't even tell if anybody's watching. Never a dull moment, guys, right? But that's all part of it. We try our best. Good evening. Welcome to C3. Tuesday night teaching. I got my cup of tea. You guys got tea near? You got a cup of tea nearby? Tonight I'm drinking, I think this one is from Israel, actually. It's from Israel. I'm here on the Facebook. Good, Jen's there. Okay, coolio. Did you find it via the Facebook, through, okay, we are watching. So you're there. You guys are there. I hope you're there. Like, there's a handful of you guys. Cool. And there's a few of you on YouTube, too, I think. So, sweet. Got a notification. Well, good. I'm glad it's working. I'm using a different software. We're not using Restream tonight. So, all right. So, here's the reality, guys, is we're using something a little bit different. I'm going to try my best to keep track of your comments. The thing that I was using before pulled all your comments into one place. So, if you've got comments, I got to now keep track of a couple different places, but I'll do my best. Welcome to C3 stream. Let's get rocking and rolling. I got my tea. You guys are there. I'm there. Let's do it. And if you are joining us tonight for the very first time, welcome. Tonight's a great night to start because we are going to be doing a brand new series starting tonight. We're going to be starting a new series. The last 8? Did we go 8, 9 weeks on the Apostle Paul? We did like 8 or 9 weeks on the Apostle Paul, and it was great. I mean, it was just fabulous time studying the Apostle Paul. But we're going to switch over tonight for the very first time, ladies and gentlemen. For the very first time, we are going to be doing the Divine Drama. Bum 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 bum. All right, what's the Divine Drama? So the Divine Drama. Hey, you know what? I think I made a video for this a while ago. Do you guys want to see a quick video intro? Let's see if it works. All right, let's try it. How do you like that? That was cool. There you go. I'll have to remember to try to play that. So we are going to be doing that. That's kind of fun. We're doing this thing called Divine Drama, and what it is a biblical narrative overview of the entire Bible. We're going to be taking, there's 30 units. 30 units that we are going to be tracking in. Thanks, Joe. It's kind of fun. Like, we like to have fun here on the C3 stream, you know what I mean? So 30 units, you're going to be hanging out with me. We'll probably break them up a bit. Well, we might break them up and stuff, but we're going to be tracking through the whole Bible. So this is perfect for people where if you have read the entire Bible before, fabulous. Come hang out with us. You'll be learning something new, I hope. If you've never even opened a page to the Bible, fabulous. You'll be learning lots of new things. There are pictures. Here, let me switch over. You guys can see this. Boom. And then wait for it. There I am. Hello. Oh, the thing cuts it off a little bit. Let me change that. So yeah, there's gonna be pictures. There's gonna be hopeful. It's a great series. Like, it really is. It's a great series. For those of you who joined us for, do you guys remember See Through the Scriptures? We did this thing called See Through the Scriptures. Kind of at the beginning of this COVID stuff, when the COVID stuff all hit. We did See Through the Scriptures, and that one was equally like a biblical overview. Is that better? Yeah, that's a little bit better. That was a biblical overview as well. And yeah, see, I mean, it's got cool graphics and stuff. It's got really neat pictures that go along with all this. So Divine Drama is the same publisher, same publishing company, producer, makes this, and it's 30 units. The Divine Drama is 30. See Through the Scripture was originally, I think, 6 or 8. We stretched it out a bit longer. So it's got pictures taking us through the Bible. We're going to be looking at themes. We're going to be looking at characters, and kind of tracking for the whole year. We'll sprinkle some other stuff in there as we go. I'm going to try to do a better job too, guys, at keeping track of the videos. In case you miss one or watch it later, no big deal. I'll try to drop them, and YouTube is the easiest one for me to keep track of videos. So if you do miss one, head to the YouTube channel, the Christ Church YouTube channel, subscribe to it while you're there, and then you'll get notifications for it and stuff like that. And when I update the playlists, you'll be able to go to a playlist that'll track. Our playlist will track for us the videos. Sound good? So tonight, as we kind of start Divine Drama and begin the conversation around Divine Drama, we'll be referring to the Bible throughout the entire study. But tonight is really kind of setting the stage. We're going to see how far we can get. But tonight is just setting the stage for the study that's in front of us. Because when you begin to try to understand the Bible, as you navigate the Bible, we've got to understand there's so much that goes into conversations and studies around the Bible, right? You don't just pick up the Bible and expect to understand everything in there. You'll spend literally your whole life trying to understand it, wrap your mind around it, and most importantly, be inspired in faith in relation to it. So Divine Drama, these pictures, and the time that we spend together will hopefully really help you better have a grasp of the Bible, the basic themes, basic storylines, basic characters, and give you a better glimpse, bigger picture of what the Bible is trying to communicate. Okay, so let's dive in. What do you guys say? Let's do it. Let's do it. Yeah. All right, so if you are on Facebook, I'm watching the comments that I have up on my screen are the ones on my personal Facebook page. So if you're there, great, drop them, and you can drop them and they're all able to track. I don't know if I'm able to pull from the community page direct. So if you got comments and you want to connect with me, do it on my personal Facebook page. Otherwise on YouTube, I can check your comments on YouTube as well. So if you want to pop over to YouTube, I can actually keep, there's a chat box for those of you who are new to YouTube. If you're watching me on the big screen, you're probably not going to find it. You're watching me on your phone, if you're watching on a laptop or something, there should be a chat section there too. So drop comments there, and I'll try to keep track. All right, here we go. Number 1. Uno. Let's start. So when we begin trying to understand the biblical narrative, when we begin to understand the biblical story, the first place is kind of understanding where we are in relation to this world, in relation to creation, and getting the picture of creation, that you and I are part of a created world, that is part of a created universe. And as you and I navigate this created world and created universe, we are part of something much bigger than ourselves, right? I mean, so how quickly and how easily do we get so narrowly focused on our lives, our perspectives, our thoughts, our emotions, our challenges of the day? And it's perfectly understandable. And yet, at the same vein, if we take a moment to pause and really consider ourselves in relation to the larger or bigger picture of this world, this universe, and throughout time and history, we begin to see actually how small we are in relation to something so much greater. And so that's part of what the biblical narrative tries to do is say, hey, you're part of something really big and wonderful and incredible. And the Bible and its story helps us understand what that big picture is all about. And so this graphic you can see in the top half there, that's the Milky Way. And then you find kind of like our little solar system in there. On the bottom portion, you see the sun is on the left-hand side. And then there's actually an arrow. Do you guys see the arrow? There's an arrow to the earth, all right? So this just helps kind of put into perspective, yeah, you are part of something really big and wondrous that's got mystery and unknowns, and you have a place, you have a role in that. You are located in that. And the biblical narrative helps us better understand what that is. It's not uncommon then for us when we sit in our lives and as we kind of navigate our lives, a lot of times people will look up at the heavens and kind of ask the big questions of why, and the big questions of, what's out there. And in the top half of this graphic, you can see there's like a guy looking out a telescope and a bunch of eyes and a bunch of question marks. And it's not uncommon that at different points in times in our life, as situations arise, that we stop, we look up at the heavens and kind of ask, yeah, what is the point? What is the purpose of all this? And how am I a part of this? How am I connected to this great, wondrous, huge universe, life itself? How does this all work, right? And getting at some of those bigger questions. What the Bible does is the Bible makes and advocates for a divine drama. That's the name of the curriculum, the divine drama. The Bible tries to convey to you and me a story that helps locate our place in this great universe and our relationship, not only to the universe, but the creator of the universe. On the bottom half of that graphic, you have the world, or the earth, and then you have the earth. It's supposed to be representative of an amphitheater. You guys know what an amphitheater is, right? And that's the idea of the divine drama, that God's work in the world, in the Bible, the story of the Bible, which takes place in ancient Israel. Hence, if you look at that world, it's kind of a bullseye on where ancient Israel would be. That really, God's work is on center stage. To understand the big questions, our place in this universe, to understand how we relate to a sense of something so much greater than ourselves, we look to this divine drama, this divine story, this biblical narrative that happened in ancient Israel, and we put it on center stage and begin to see it and watch it and examine it and understand it. And in doing so, we can better understand ourselves and our world. What's fascinating is if you do take the time to examine the biblical story, you'll realize that the Bible takes place in history. The Bible is not a fiction story. It's also not a scientific book. The Bible is trying to get and communicate these stories of events and people and times and places and mysterious things that happened within a context, within the world. Here's a graphic that shows you a little bit zoom. If we were to zoom in on where that bullseye is, it shows you a specific area, a geographic region that we consider to be kind of the ancient Middle East. And that's where this biblical narrative, where God's finger really touched in some profound ways, where he got active in some really profound and unique ways that the Bible tries to discuss and talk about. So it's not like God is just like floating out there aimlessly, but that God is actually involved with our world. He is invested and involved in creation, so much so that he actually became involved personally in a specific time and in a specific place that we can actually point to in the biblical narrative. There's a specific location and persons that God got up close and personal with as a medium through which he would reach the whole world. So it's kind of humbling, but we can't ever forget as Christians, and that when we read the Bible, it happened in history. So there's a bunch of empires on this graphic, if you will. The Hittites, Phoenicia, Babylon, the Assyrian Empire, Egypt. You can see that God's activity and the divine drama unfolded in history in real and concrete ways at a time that was, to our perspective, ancient. Right? That's why we refer to it as kind of the ancient Israel. If you were to look at modern day, here is the Middle East in 2002, which is when this curriculum was created. So this is 20 years old, bear in mind. Okay, it's 2002. But it's a reminder to us that God's activity and this divine drama actually took place in our world. Like, concretely in our world. It took place in our world filled with people and countries and politics and all that comes with being part of our world. And you can see little old Israel's there in white. You see it? You can see kind of the Arabian Peninsula, if you will, and then you go up top left, Mediterranean Sea. And then, of course, hiding in there is little Israel. And that more specifically is where God showed up in person in Jesus. It's cool to know that the God who created the universe would become that specific in order to talk to us, reach us, save us. Pretty powerful. Here's a zoom in on ancient Israel. You can see here at the top, it's oriented where the top part would be north. The bottom part is south. So this is Israel, north to south. It's not very big. Israel is extraordinarily small, actually. You can see in here some really significant biblical cities. In the top right-hand side, you see Damascus. Damascus, for those of us who traveled in the recent study on Paul, he was on this road to Damascus. He was on his way to Damascus, that city that existed there. He was on the road there when he had his conversion experience and came to know Jesus. You go down farther south, you can find Jerusalem is there with the star. Obviously, you can continue to visit Jerusalem today as well. Right below that, you see Bethlehem. Bethlehem today you can visit as well, but hugely important in the biblical narrative. Why? Well, that's where Jesus is born, and he's predicted that he would be born there. You hop one little further step south, and you get to Hebron. And Hebron is really big in the stories when we examine the King David. And you pop around here, and these are all ancient cities that located the divine drama in real people's lives and in ancient cities. And we're going to learn about a lot of these ancient cities. When we study the Bible, these cities have names, places, locations. Some of them have been unearthed and have been archaeologically, we can come to them and see them, and it's fascinating. We can find them still. Some of them are just simply lost to time, and we make estimations in the biblical narrative where they might have been located in relation to ancient Israel. But real stories and real cities existed, and it's pretty fascinating stuff. This is a sense that gives you the geographic perspective of Israel. Generally speaking, we can say that the biblical narrative is established and stemming from Jerusalem. Jerusalem is kind of the heartbeat of the overarching biblical narrative. It's not always the case. If you open to the book of Genesis and you start reading, you're not going to read about Jerusalem. Okay, that's true. However, when you take the overarching picture of what the Bible and that timelines and people and places. Jerusalem is really kind of a heartbeat place for the biblical narrative. And you can see there it's got some different mileage and so forth to show you how far away certain cities are. And it's not very far. I mean, Jerusalem up to Nazareth is 65 miles. Okay, and Jesus travels those 65 miles pretty regularly. A number of times he travels north and south, kind of in that stretch, if you will. So lots of walking in the Bible. A lot of riding donkeys and horses and stuff like that. A lot of marching. The bottom part also gives you a sense of like the geographic layout. Let me go back one. So if you look here, you can get the various colors show you how mountainous or sea level is kind of zeroed out, and purple is below sea level. Ancient Israel was actually a pretty arid climate as a whole. To this day, it remains arid. But if you travel, not surprisingly, if you travel along from the Sea of Galilee down the Jordan River to the Dead Sea, that's going to be the most fertile place. In fact, up until the 1900s, the people that lived in that geographic region would depend upon rains to come and flood the canyons. A lot of these lines that you see coming off at like the Jabbok River, for example, or Arnon River and stuff like that. Those are big canyons that when it rains, it floods. Oh man! All of a sudden, it says my stream dropped. Oh, that's not good. Well, YouTube's still going. Well, guess what, guys? This is why you just get nervous trying different softwares, everybody. Because you don't know what's going to happen. No, you don't. For some reason, it dropped. I think it's back. Well, YouTube kept up. Cool. I'm going to keep going. Geographic reasons. Rains come during the flood seasons, and they would flood into these canyons. And just like today, like if you go to Moab, Arches, Grand Canyon, kind of that area, if they get rain, flash flooding is common. And in the case of ancient Israel, what would happen is they'd get rain in the springtime. The canyons would fill with water and become just huge, raging rivers. And they would all flood towards the Jordan River and the Sea of Galilee. And then the banks of the Jordan River would overflow, and that would provide a fertile area for farming. And so the Jordan River is kind of like the only farming in the area up until more recently when irrigation and development happened. But historically, people lived up and down the Jordan River for the purposes of fertile farming. And then if you go over to the coastline, of course, on the coastline, you'd get some of the rains coming off the coastline, and you'd have some fertility there. If you go farther east, you're going to get more and more arid, and certainly southeast particularly. So the Dead Sea is below sea level, and also in corresponding with that has a really unique mineral makeup. So if you go to the Dead Sea, the salt content is so dense that you can actually float in the water without trying. Your buoyancy is different. Been there, done it. It's weird. You sit in there, and you just like sit in the Dead Sea. It's kind of a bizarre experience. But it's got to do with its location below sea and the density of salt. So the geographic area has its own uniqueness to it, and plays a role, actually, as we're going to see, very much so, a pretty profound role in the divine drama. For example, in ancient times, because rain was so important, and these rains would come and flood the Nile, guess what the number one thing people prayed and asked God for? That'd be rain. They needed rain. People needed rain, and so they would pray to gods based on rain, right? And so we'll find examples of this as we unpack the biblical story, that it makes sense. There's a lot in the Bible that when you begin to study it and examine it, it makes a lot of sense. Here's an example of some of the various altitude changes that you can find in the geographic regions. It's no small thing that, like, for example, in the Psalms, when it says, I lift my eyes up From whence does my help come from? That's like one of the most, that's a big line, okay? Big line. Very famous, very famous. I lift my eyes up. From whence does my help come from? They mean quite literally that people in the Old Testament had this battle going on between indigenous gods and the God of Yahweh, the God of the Jews. And the Jews would literally look up at the mountaintops because that's where the indigenous gods supposedly lived. And so when we begin to understand some of those things, it brings a new level of meaning and understanding to the biblical context. It helps us understand the Bible in a whole new kind of way. So when people say, I lift my eyes up, from where does my help come from? What that means, the psalmist is saying, is, hey, I'm literally looking up at the top of the mountains where supposedly these other gods, these rain gods, live. Where does my help come from? Next line, next verse, my help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. So he's saying, okay, my help doesn't come from these false gods, these indigenous gods. My help comes from the Jewish God, Yahweh, the maker of heaven and earth, he who made those mountains. Okay, so it's really important that we begin to understand the history, the geography, the culture, the context, and that's a lot of the stuff that we'll be doing during this study together, is spending time understanding the history, the culture, the context, so that when we look and read the Bible, we understand it in the richness that can be found within. Okay, so far so good, guys. You guys tracking? You're back. 5 seconds. Okay, so it's just a quick blip. Hey man, I don't know why my streaming was really good. Servers, that's what happens. Server not available. Facebook servers not reliable. We're making some big, good changes, important changes coming up as a church to ensure that our streaming continues. It's been fascinating working in the church context, guys. Believe it or not, streaming is one of the biggest issues that churches face because now everybody is streaming thanks to COVID. And so streaming servers are getting overloaded. They're absolutely getting pounded. It's fascinating. So we're actually having to go so far as to buy a more secure streaming service to ensure that we don't drop on our streams, because that's been happening. And streamings are crashing on Sunday mornings particularly because churches all over the country are streaming. Little known fact, insider tip. We're working on it. It's kind of cool. Okay, here we go. This is like arguably one of my favorite graphics. No joke. Because it so succinctly helps us understand the Bible in a really helpful, accessible kind of way. You guys see this? Okay. So most people don't know that the word Bible, literally, Bible is a Greek word. Biblio, B-I-B-L-I-O, biblio, and the Greek word biblio means library. So when we say Bible or the Bible, we mean the library, and that's exactly what the Bible is. So if you go to, yeah, you love it too. Thank you, Jen. Isn't it? It's so good. If you go into the Bible and you go to the table of contents, you find out there's a bunch of books in the Bible. The Bible in and of itself is not one singular novel or book, but it is a collection of writings. It's a collection of books. And most people don't even know that. They assume because it's bound and it's stamped with the same cover, that is all one book. And in a sense, you can definitely make the case that, yes, it is one beautiful, cohesive whole. But it's much more accurate and much more able, we can grasp it more and shape our expectations accordingly when we see and understand the Bible as not just a single book with one author, but in fact a collection of writings, a collection of books with many voices, many perspectives, many theological lenses, all grounded in the same God, all grounded in the same witness, all grounded in the work of the Holy Spirit in and through, all grounded as God himself, right? We believe as Christian people that ultimately the one behind and involved in and speaking through these pieces of literature is God. That this is ultimately God's book, okay? God is ultimately the author of all of history and the author of the divine drama. He is if there is one author, the author is God. But beautifully so, God uses the voices and stories and God moments of a ton of different people to compose his beautiful, grand story. Okay? So you can't treat all parts of the Bible the same. You'll be super frustrated. They're totally different in many, many cases. One type of literature or book in the Bible or chapter or verse in the Bible will be nothing like a different part. And if you've ever opened up the Bible and you begin to read different parts of it or selections of it, you'll notice it's literally not written in the same language all the way through. Did you know that? It's literally not written in the same language. The original manuscript, not same languages. Let alone dialect, syntax, grammatical variation, etc., etc., etc. That if you look at it and, well, let's do it. Let's look at it and I'll describe it to you. So here's a bookshelf. You have 3 shelves. The top bookshelf says Hebrew Scriptures, or the Jewish structure. And what this is trying to communicate is for Jews, if you were to go to the bookstore and buy a Jewish Bible, okay, that like is titled the Jewish Bible, or the Hebrew Scriptures is usually what you'll find it entitled. Not that long ago, I had a woman come up to me at church and share with me her excitement. She might even be listening. She's been tuning in sometimes. So Trudy, shout out to you if you've been listening. But the example would be like, I think it was like a friend of yours or recommended this or something to that, a neighbor. You ended up getting a Hebrew Bible. And what a Hebrew Bible is the same as the Christian Bible, what we refer to as the Old Testament. Okay, that's a bad way of saying that. The same books that are in the Hebrew Scriptures are the same books that are in what Christians refer to as the Old Testament. Much better way of saying it. That they're actually the same exact books. Same books, same words, same stories, etc., etc. Christians have a major delineation, though, a major change, a significant, gosh, the right word isn't quite there for me. I wish I had a better way of saying it, but for a Christian, the way that we approach and understand even those Hebrew Scriptures is different than the Jews themselves because of Jesus for us. And so for a Christian Bible, and the ones that, for those of you who are Christian and follow, you have usually the Bible split into 2 halves, what we refer to as the Old Testament and then the New Testament. The New Testament is from the birth of Jesus onward. The Old Testament is everything that happens before Jesus. Because it is the stuff that happens before Jesus, that's what the Jewish people hold to as their Hebrew Scriptures. The Hebrew Scriptures are broken into a couple of, so a Jewish Bible, or the Jews break the Bible up into a couple specific parts. Again, they would not have anything about, nothing in the New Testament, nothing with Jesus, post-Jesus type stuff. So the Jewish structure, if you will, that's a good way to describe it. They're right, Jewish structure. The Jewish structure is law, former prophets, latter prophets, and then writings. And so that's how they categorize their library. You know, in a library, how you have different genres? You got mystery, you got science fiction, you got biographies, you got et cetera, et cetera. That's what the Bible tries to do too. The Bible organizes itself according to genre. That's what they did. When they sat down and they got these books together, they organized it not chronologically, not by publication date, not by, language and whatever. What they organized it by was genre. And so let's focus on the latter 2 parts, the Old Testament and New Testament. So the Old Testament is structured as history, poetry, and then major and minor prophets. So in history are going to be the stories and experiences that a lot of us learn in Sunday school. There's a bunch in there you did not learn in Sunday school. Let me tell you that. We'll get to that later. in detail. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Almost every time there's a 1st and a 2nd, at one point in time they were one. Okay, so like 1st and 2nd Samuel, it's just a really big book called Samuel. They got so big that they're like chopped it in half and said this is easier if it's 1 and 2, part 1, part 2. Same with Chronicles, same with Kings. They originally believed that the author or authors wrote it as a single piece, and then along the way, when they started trying to organize this into a helpful, useful, readable format, they broke it into two. So First Chronicles and Second Chronicles, at one point in time, it was just known as Chronicles. It just was a big stinking book. So they decided to make it a little bit easier by breaking it in half. The Old Testament history are going to be those stories that have historical narratives. I will hesitate to describe it as what you and I almost wish they would use a different term than history, because in the Bible, when it uses that term history, it's not fact book like you have a history book. In 6th grade, social studies and history meant that you learned about, the American Revolutionary War, right? Little bit different with the Old Testament. The emphasis is less on how many troops and how many this or that, and more about finding the story. Okay? There are points and things within the Old Testament and New Testament that we sometimes lose sight of the author, we lose sight of the context, and we lose sight of what God is trying to do in the story and with the story. So that terminology of history, don't confuse that with like fact book. Those books are not meant to be encyclopedias. That they're not encyclopedias that just list off facts. What they're doing are covering historical narratives and stories that display God's work in the world, not an encyclopedia. And if you try to make them into an encyclopedia, you're going to be really, really frustrated and very, very confused. Let me give you a simple example. Take Joshua. Okay, the book of Joshua there is in that historical one. It's in the historical category. But we also mentioned Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Joshua and 1st and 2nd Chronicles don't agree on everything, factually. Like, they just overtly disagree. There are a couple things. They disagree on how ancient Israel was conquered by the Jews. One book describes it one way, another book describes it another way. Well, that's because the authors had totally different intents and wanted to communicate something different about God and the Jewish people. They wanted to communicate different stories that convey significant, meaningful things about who God is and how he's working in the world. They weren't intending to sit down and write a factual encyclopedia. They were intending to capture what God was doing in the world. And so there are going to be things like that that cause a lot of confusion, and it can cause a lot of consternation when people try to force things to play nice with each other. But when you have this variety of voices and this variety of books, and you just simply allow them to be what they are, it's way easier. Don't try to make the Bible anything other than what it is. Don't make the Bible into what you want it to be. Simply let the Bible be what the Bible is. And it is the divine drama. It is these voices, perspectives. It is the work of the Holy Spirit that's going to work in our lives over this next year as we study it. Let it be what it is. Don't make it something that's not. Too many people try to do that. Same would be true in the New Testament. Same with those history books. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. We talk about this at church. Gospels are firsthand eyewitness accounts of the life, death, resurrection of Jesus. The Gospel of John has Jesus visiting the temple both in the beginning and at the end because of what he's trying to say theologically about Jesus being connected to the temple and having the temple as bookends. The Gospel of Luke has the temple as the culmination. It has nothing to do with Jesus. Jesus doesn't go in the Gospel of Luke. Jesus doesn't go to the temple in the beginning. He goes to the temple. Well, he does as a baby, but that's not what I'm describing. As an adult, he doesn't go to the culmination of Luke is when Jesus, quote, sets his face towards Jerusalem. So he kind of puts his eyeballs on Jerusalem and totally different theological statement than what John is trying to do, associating Jesus as a Paschal Passover lamb. And by taking them and allowing them both to be what they are, we get a much better perspective and understanding of who Jesus is. So don't make the Bible do things that it's not meant to do. That's when people get confused and frustrated. Simply let it be what it is and let God do what God does through it. And in it, you'll find and hear him as we begin to study it. Sorry, am I getting soapboxy for you? I apologize. Tea break. It's good tea. All right. So you have history in the Old Testament. You have poetry. The most famous of the poetic books is probably Psalms. Psalms often were set to music. Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, or sometimes referred to as Song of Songs. Okay, here's another good example. Song of Songs. There you go. Read that with your spouse. That is erotic Egyptian love poetry. That's what the Song of Songs is. They talk a lot about coconuts and climbing palm trees and stuff in that one. That's like rated R. It's also beautiful and has a profound way of pointing out the passion, the love, the intimacy that God holds for his people. In fact, there's a famous story that goes in rabbinic tradition, in Jewish tradition. There was which one was he? The rabbis keep very good track of who's who, and there's like a ranking of the famous rabbis. One of the guys, I don't want to misspeak, so I won't give him a name. I won't guess. I won't even try to guess. The story goes that one of the more famous rabbis, when asked which is the most important of the books of the Bible, quickly and without hesitation said quickly and easily the Song of Songs. And everyone's like, the what? The Song of Songs? The Egyptian erotic love poetry? That one? In Jewish tradition, rabbinic tradition, you're not even allowed to read that until you reach a certain level because of it's intense. And he said, yeah, that's the one, because that's the only one that can capture even the smallest sentiment of how significant God's love is for God's people, and the intimacy and love that can be exchanged between God and his people. So to try to say that the Song of Solomon is history or a letter or something like it just doesn't fit in that genre. It's poetry. That's what it is. You got the major and the minor prophets. Pretty simple there, actually. The major means long-winded. Minor, succinct. That's pretty much it. And prophets are people who speak for God, that God speaks through in significant ways. That's a very small, simplistic caricature, but a prophet is someone whose life is really consumed by a message from God to people, and down to every aspect of their life is totally consumed by that call. Yeah. So there you go. That's the Old Testament. I'm sorry, I haven't been tracking. You guys popping questions at all? Okay, I don't see any. YouTube? Nope. Okay, I'll keep going. Hi guys. Yeah, you're all there. I'm so glad you're all there. It's kind of spread out, but coolio. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight, guys. I love spending time with you. Okay. New Testament. Should we tackle it? Let's do it. What time is it? 8:15. Cool. We got some more time. New Testament. Let's talk New Testament. When you think about the New Testament, it follows similar patterns to the Old Testament in that it has history. That is some narrative books that are trying to capture a specific story. But these stories all revolve around the life, death, resurrection of Jesus. We refer to them as Gospels. The word gospel is a Greek word, and it means good news. Literally means good news. Gospel means the good news. So another way of saying, like, for example, gospel the Gospel of John, the Gospel of Matthew is the good news of Matthew, the good news from John. So that's what the Gospels are. Luke is interesting in that he is the same author who wrote the book of Acts. And you see Acts there kind of tipping a little bit away. And that's because Matthew, Mark, Luke, John are considered Gospels. Acts is a bit different. Acts is the Acts of the Apostles. And the book of Acts tracks the church. Okay, the centerpiece character in the book of Acts is the church and what Jesus does through the church and in the church. So while Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John have to do with Jesus in the body, in his own body, like a physical body we're walking around in, the book of Acts has to do with what Jesus does and how Jesus works within the body of believers, the body of the church. And so that's the delineation there. So we spent a lot of time actually in the book of Acts just recently. If you did the Paul study with me, we tracked a ton in the book of Acts because it really has to do with the birth of the church, what happens through the missionary work of the early apostles, and eventually it tracks with one particular individual has the emphasis, and that is the person of Paul, the apostle Paul. Now, Paul ends up writing a bunch of letters, which comes next. Romans, 1st, 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians. Ooh, that's one difference. 1st and 2nd Corinthians, they're not one book. They really are two separate letters. Sorry, that's confusing for you. Same with 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy. What it means is that they're written to the same communities in the New Testament. So 1st Corinthians and 2nd Corinthians were written to the church in Corinth. Different times. They were written at different times, and they have different content, but it's the same church or the same community. Okay, so it'd be kind of like saying, a letter to Christ Church, one Christ Church, two Christ Church, or even probably more accurately, one Mequon, or one Grafton, two Grafton. That all these books, Romans was written to the church in Rome. 1st Corinthians, 2nd Corinthians was written to the church in Corinth. Galatians was a letter that was written to a geographic area spanning a bunch of churches. So Galatia would have been like a city, or excuse me, not a city. It's the opposite of what I would say. The others are cities. Galatia is like a geographic region, like a state, like Wisconsin. Okay, so whereas Rome is a city, Galatia is like a state. It's a region. It's a large demographic. And that letter would have been circulated. Okay, so it would have started at one place, and then they would have gone to another place, and then another place. It would have been passed around. Ephesians was written to the church in Ephesus, Philippians, Philippi, Colossians, Colossae, Thessalonians to the church in Thessalonica. However, all those letters, even though they were written specifically to specific communities and cities, with the exception of Galatians being to an entire geographic region, all these letters all got passed around. Everybody seemed to know Paul. And so when you found out that your church had a letter and this other church down the street had a letter, you'd be like, hey, let's compare notes. What's your letter say? And let me show you mine. And so that's how these letters got circulated. They started of their own accord. They got circulated. Sometimes they're to specific individuals. 1st, 2nd Timothy, Titus, and Philemon were written to specific individuals. Like Philemon, for example, is written by Paul to a guy named Philemon about an escaped slave, Onesimus, and how the church should respond, and how Philemon himself should personally respond, as Philemon was the slave owner. So he turns the world upside down by saying, hey, this guy is, you should be looking at this guy not as your slave, but as your brother in faith. And conversely, for the same for Onesimus. So it's just really fascinating. These are all letters that Paul wrote, like sat down and probably dictated. He didn't write them by longhand. He would have dictated these to a student or a friend or a colleague that traveled with him. Then you have what we refer to as the general letters. And the reason we refer to these as general letters is because Paul wrote so many dang letters, or so many letters are attributed to Paul. The general letters are like the other people's. Hebrews, James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and Jude are also all letters written to and within the early church, written to churches. And then you finally get this one bizarro one called Apocalypse. The word apocalypse comes from the Greek word apokalypto, which means reveal, which is why we call the Revelations of John. It's actually the Apocalypse of John. And we just refer to it as Revelation. And it's its own category for sure, because it's trippy. It takes a special measure of discernment, context, patience, tradition, theology to even begin to scratch the surface of the book of Revelation. And I always joke, I will preach on it as soon as I understand it. It is a beautiful book, though, and should not be neglected. It is simply must be handled in the same way that, like, Song of Songs must be handled within its respective genre. The same is true for the book of Revelation. And you can get into some really weird stuff out there because people don't handle the book of Revelation with perhaps the same measure of context, care, et cetera, that perhaps I would hope or advocate for. Don't study it lightly. We'll say that. Okay. So this gives you guys an idea of, like, this is the Bible. Okay. It's not just a book that's sitting on your shelf. It's way more complex and therefore way more rich. There's way more to it than just, oh, yeah, that's the family Bible that just sits there and has for generations, and it's got the family tree in the front cover. The Bible is way cooler than that, frankly. Like, it's got stories and heroes and drama. It's got it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, it's intense stuff. It's got poetry and songs and heroes and villains, and it's got people, like real people. And one of the beautiful things about the Bible is that in its complexity, it doesn't sugarcoat the brokenness, the messiness of humanity. Like, it's relatable, it's real, it's genuine, it's authentic. And the stories and the stuff that we're going to find in there, like, you'll read it and you'll be like, yeah, I get that. Too often what happens, though, is people try to take off this little bite or this little sound bite or snippet. They heard a 4-minute sermon at some point in time in their life, and the Bible becomes intimidating and totally distant from them. And this time that we're going to spend together is hopefully going to bridge that gap to help you be able to pick up the Bible and be like, yeah, this thing's awesome. And as you do that, God will begin to speak and work and show up as you read it and as you engage with it, both privately as well as publicly. And it won't be as intimidating. I remember vividly in college sitting down and going to a Bible study. First week of college. And the local... There was a Christian group on campus, and we were going to go to a Bible study together. I'm like, yeah, I'm down for a Bible study. Let's do it. So I showed up to this Bible study with some friends, and one of the people who was there, the person who was leading it said, turn to 2 Peter. And the person sitting next to me was like, turn to what? What page number is that? And, you never want to make the assumption that people have any idea what's going on with the Bible, because it is so intimidating and big and confusing. And so... if you are entering into this time together, if you're studying it for the first time and you need to use your table of contents, do it. Use it. That's what it's there for. And don't feel ashamed for using the table of contents. It's really confusing. And so when somebody says turn to 2 Peter, you're like, what is that? There's reason for it. It's because it's one book among a whole bunch of books. And you should not be surprised at how confusing the Bible can be. But hopefully when you get done spending time together, it'll be a breeze for you. All right. Let's talk about this before we wrap up. What time is it? Yeah, I got about a couple more minutes, guys. I could keep going. You guys know me. I'm so long-winded. I love talking about the Bible. I love it. So this graphic is kind of a neat way to help us capture the tension and the confusion. Okay. Pretty much everything I was just talking about. Here's this poor guy at the bottom. You see this guy? He's got the big question mark, and he's like, what the heck? How am I supposed to make sense of all this Christian faith stuff? You got the Bible, you got that at the top. You got preachers. That's the kind of black figure with the white collar. That's a traditional. If you go, for example, to our traditional service at church, even Pastor Bob and I wear white collars. That's signifies the office. So this is like you hear pastors and preachers. You see the red building there with a little cross and the steeple on it, like church. You know, all of these things on this image play a role in how you understand faith and how you understand God and how you understand the Bible. And it's not surprising that it's confusing as all get out because of all the different things that you hear about the Bible. You hear about Jesus, you hear about God. How do you make sense of all this stuff? You got different voices and different people and small groups, and you have death, right? You see the skull and the tombstone. What are we supposed to do with death, and why is there death, and why is there evil, and why is there all this bad stuff? And money, you see the money sign there with the little envelope. Why is the church take all my money? Why does that happen? And what's up with that? And how come I go to some churches and even down to like angels and demons and the 10 Commandments? And it's little wonder, and we should not be surprised that when people are interested in conversations about faith, it's so easily intimidating and overwhelming and confusing. We should never make assumptions. We are a Christ Church, for those of you who are part of Christ Church, lifting lives, elevating Christ, a church for those who aren't here yet. And that last part is really kind of our emphasis, and that's because you can't get to the first two without acknowledging the last part. You can't. We are about lifting lives and elevating Christ in everything we do, lifting the lives of the people around us and elevating Jesus in everything that we do. But you got to make that accessible. You got to help people come along with that. You can't just make assumptions about what they know or don't know. And so we at church are really sensitive to exactly this image in trying to create ways for people to get into the Bible, get into the faith, and begin to explore who Jesus is in meaningful and accessible ways, because it's just confusing. On top of all of this, the Christian life somehow fits in among and alongside all the other stuff that we have going on in our life. You know what I mean? When you become a Christian, it's not like all of a sudden you stop going to work, or you stop having fun, or you stop going out for fun things, and you stop being a family member. You're not involved in, right? That life itself is complex. Life itself has a myriad of parts and pieces to it. And so how does the church, the Bible, and the Christian faith fit in and work in relationship to all the other aspects of our life? How does the Bible and this divine drama relate to all the other pieces? Nope, don't want to go there. Oh, I do, because that's going to be the images but we're going to save it. It's too good. If I get going on that, I'm going to go for another hour, and I can't do that. And it's time for me to ready to begin to wrap up. So, okay. Let's do that. That was good, right? Was that good? We set the stage tonight. That was the goal. The goal for tonight is to say, look, thanks for coming along on this crazy journey. We're going to do it together. We're going to take our time. We're going to ask questions. We're going to look at the Bible. We're going to try to get a sense of that big divine drama, the big divine story of what God has done, so that we can better understand what he is doing, so that he can fulfill one day. We can be ready and anticipatory of what he has planned and promised for the future. So welcome to the Divine Drama. I hope this was helpful for you, kind of setting the ground, setting the stage, and kind of grounding us in what is to come over these weeks together. If you have found this helpful, fabulous. Let me know. I appreciate when people communicate to me what they find helpful and how so. Feel free to drop me an email. Let me throw my email up there for you guys. If you got further questions and stuff, if you think this might be helpful for people, let's do this. Boom. Drop me an email if you're curious, and if you're going to come along. If you got questions throughout the entire series, feel free to put it in the comments if you've got questions. Like I said, I do try to track alongside. The stage is set. I'm ready to dive in. Fabulous, Susan. That's awesome. I'm so glad. It's going to be fun. This is going to be good. This is going to be really good, guys. You know what? And also share this because we are a church for those who aren't here yet. That means this podcast, this video time that we spend together, this class is for people who aren't here yet either. So that means please extend this, tag someone. If you think this might be helpful for someone, drop them an email with this in there. Drop them and invite them. Say, hey, come hang out with me Tuesday nights. Come and check this out. Let's go out for coffee afterwards. Invite them to church. Invite them to what we're doing at church and all the different things going on at church. In fact, what a segue. There's always stuff going on at church and lots of ways for you and others to be involved and engaged. Check out the online stuff that we do have. Go to ChristchurchMequon.life if you want to grow in other various facets of Christian connection and life. ChristchurchMequon.org is our main page, and that's where we direct all of our visitors and kind of guests. ChristchurchMequon.life is kind of your insiders. And since you guys are listening, I'm assuming you're kind of on the inside, but please explore both and make the invitation for others to come to both. Here's another invite for you. If you enjoyed tonight, Tuesday night teachings, you can always join me on Thursday mornings as well for Thursday morning meditation. Thursday morning meditation has a totally different vibe. It is in the morning at 7:30 a.m. What we do is we read a chunk of the Bible together. We meditate on that. We dwell on the Word together. After we do some Bible reading, we do some praying together. And we lift up petitions, and we lift up what's going on in our communities and what's going on in our world. And then we wrap up with God stories and Holy Spirit shout-outs, just times where we can kind of acknowledge, yeah, God's still alive. God's still moving. Things are happening with God in this world. And so join me 7:30 a.m. for those three things, scripture, prayer, and then God stories. Would love to have you join me for that as well. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks for being part of today's and tonight's C3 stream, Talking Christ in Christ Church. It's a blast hanging out with you guys. So we'll be back on next week, Tuesday, picking up where we left off with the Divine Drama. Thanks for joining in tonight, guys. God bless, and we'll talk to you and